To be honest, it's a shame that your president has had to go through this before I even got elected. It began. And it began illegally. And hopefully somebody's going to look at the other side. This was an illegal takedown that failed. And hopefully somebody's going to be looking at the other side.
And there we have it. President Trump reacting to the Mueller report coming in. Of course, you heard right at the top of the hour from our friends at Fox News that it's not enough for the Democrats. Well, when will it be enough for the Democrats? When they run the president out of office? Look, it all goes back to Strzok Page, Andrew McCabe, James Comey, the cabal that didn't happen, and we've wasted millions of dollars. We've indicted how many Russian bots that will never, ever come to justice. And for what? To continue to try and discredit President Donald Trump. Kevin Miller in the morning, KIDO Talk Radio, 107.5 FM, 580 AM. We'll take your calls at 580-5436, 580-KIDO. Joining us now for analysis, our great friend, cybersecurity expert, Michael Dougherty. Mr. Dougherty, good morning.
Good morning. How are you, sir?
Well, there we have it. Maxine Waters is angry. Jerry Nadler is angry. And Donald Trump is happy. Your thoughts?
Well, this is what happens. Everyone needs to look back at this and see. This is what happens when there's no due process, when you allow a star chamber to drag it out. So what they all started doing is an intimidation racket to squeeze people on the rack to break. And they made things up to go along, and they took people down on the periphery through intimidation or finding out things they did wrong. But they never got near, nor did they ever crack the nut. They didn't. There was no there there. And finally, after digging all the way down to China, Mueller had to throw in the towel. Now you will see what happens in politics versus life. These people note who just lies and lies and lies, because liars just keep on lying, and crooks just keep on lying. It's like someone that denies they committed a crime all the way to the death chamber, no matter what, because they have nothing to lose. So you're never, ever, 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 ever going to hear CNN or MSNBC or Maxine Waters or any of them say, oh, thank you very much, you're wrong, because they're in the business to get votes, and their business is to make people think that they are the savior. And they can't possibly stay in business if they say, oh, yeah, we just lie and exploit you to get your vote. And if we don't have a narrative of your being a victim, we don't have a party. And so this is, the question is going to be is how much is the American public going to wake up or not? And enough to elect Trump. We're going to see what's going to happen as far as backlash.
Well, and as Sarah Sanders said just moments ago on Fox and Friends, $25 million for absolutely nothing.
Well, absolutely nothing for the right or absolutely nothing for justice, but $25 million for them to keep a narrative, to throw a fit for the establishment and bureaucracy and elite infrastructure of the power grid in this country to stay in power. $25 million to create a red herring so that Trump's being a president can be impeded. Look, it's war. Okay, so when it's war, there are no rules. And part of their strategy is, well, if we lose, we play dirty. We throw trash cans in his path. We preoccupy. How many valid media stories were never reported because all they did was scream about Donald Trump? And don't think it's going to stop. Because they can't stop. They put themselves in a corner. And the only way they're going to get out really is if they fail. I mean, the American public's just got to at some point get fed up with this. There has to be some accountability.
It does make you wonder, though, about these House investigations. 81 people subpoenaed. Maxine Waters saying it's not over. The usual suspects. You have Chuck Schumer and you have Nancy Pelosi now, Michael Dougherty, attacking Robert Mueller.
Well, of course, because they're sociopaths. I mean, it's a Shark Tank, and sharks attack each other. It is. You just have to start off with the premise of what it is, okay? And this is what's hard for the American public to get around their heads, because we're taught that Washington is. We're taught basically 19th century politics, and that with the cherry tree and crossing the Potomac, and Abe can't tell a lie. That's not what Washington is. Washington is theater, lying, nonstop repositioning. It is a kaleidoscope of Alice in Wonderland hot air BS. So those people think that way. They don't think like normal people, and they just move on. They just change their. And there's a fantastic couple-minute YouTube narrative video of Nancy Pelosi saying exactly this, that it is a tactic. It is just a tactic. And they're all at work, and they all just, the whistle stops at 5 o'clock, they collect their check, and they go get coffee. So, of course, she's going to start this. That's what she's going to do because, they have constituents of stupid people. They keep them elected. There's enough stupid people in Nancy Pelosi's district. Look at San Francisco swirl down the toilet, and no one even noticed to do a thing about it or acknowledge that their tactics are wrong. It is the ultimate denial.
Michael Dougherty joining us. Michael, if people want to get a hold of you, what can they do?
The Devil Inside the Beltway.com is going to have me on Facebook and Twitter, and that's that.
Back to the Mueller report, though. It's dropped on Friday. William Barr releases the statement on yesterday, 4 pages, if you will, and now they want to investigate William Barr. It's just crazy.
But see, this is my point. It will never end until you walk away from them. Until voters in their areas walk away from them, until viewers walk away from MSNBC and CNN and NBC, it'll continue because they're just pandering to an audience, trying to make money by staying in power, trying to make money by selling ads that they watch. It's really, really, really unfortunate because it's just, it's a free fall of just hot air BS. It's tragic. And, it's up to how long are people going to understand that they're on a merry-go-round to nowhere. I don't know how long we're going to go, wait a minute.
In reality, I'm sure more people care about their basketball tournaments than care about this.
Oh, true. Or their dog pictures on Facebook.
Right.
So, and that's a scary part, folks, because this has gotten to such an extreme. You have to understand, stealing due process because you don't like someone is a really dangerous point. That's like saying, I hate O.J. Simpson. I know he's guilty. Therefore, he should not have had a trial. Okay? These people are arguing that people shouldn't have trials. And they get up there, and these are people that are supposedly responsible and take oaths to defend the Constitution, to work for their constituents. Or people that are on television are there to protect the American public and speak truth to power. And that is gone. And that'll only be taken care of if it concerns you. You have to understand the price you pay when you allow this type of stuff to continue.
Michael Dougherty, when we take a look at what else is going on in Washington, any thoughts?
Well, no one cares. This is all an accountability racket. It's like every time you take a swing at Donald Trump, he seems to win and come back more powerful. And this is why they're not going to really stop. So I don't know. This is who Washington is, folks. This is what people talk about when they say the swamp. Get over the fact that not everyone is a liar there, okay? I think a lot of people blow off going, well, everyone does it. That's just the way they are. That's a cop-out. That is not what everybody does in Washington. There's a difference between true narratives about what's wrong versus just pathological lying to hold on to power. And you have to go to work as a citizen to figure that out. So if you want Washington to change, you really have to vote, and you have to people that like Pelosi and their ilk have to be held accountable.
All right, let's go to the tech sector today. Apple expected to make some big announcements getting into the Netflix business. Your thoughts?
Well, this will be interesting because everyone, is chasing the money on media, but we're getting to a little bit of a point of saturation. And Netflix, again, ironically built a brand. It wasn't that long ago where they were kind of struggling because people were not really getting stuff to the mail anymore. And they were the first ones to kind of come up with survival because they were in that business. Now there's so much money if you do shows and you stream. And ironically, we're going to have these tech companies try to become ABC, CBS, and NBC from like the 60s. So I don't think that Apple has it automatic by any means. And already Hollywood is complaining about Apple because Apple management is a bunch of control freaks. And so you can't do that in the creative process. So it's going to be interesting to watch how, we make great, unusually tech things, therefore we're going to be really good at entertainment products. Not so fast.
Well, getting back to the saturation, we've got Disney in it, we've got Paramount in it, we've got Netflix in it, we've got Hulu. Michael Dougherty, we could go on and on. What's next? Microsoft getting into the streaming business?
Oh, they're in, aren't they? Yeah. So because and they've got sub products I happen to know about it, and Amazon's there. I mean, yeah. I mean, look, it's very profitable if you do a show. The whole TV world has changed because now you have a series and people want to binge watch it like it's a big mega movie. And so, if you find an audience, you can do really well. And, it's kind of interesting because it is cracking Hollywood. Hollywood's influence is really waning between how cheap it is to produce and splitting all over the country because Hollywood made itself so expensive and so liberal and so politicized. And then it's hypocritical with Harvey Weinstein. And then you also have China breathing down their neck. So it's a good thing. All this innovation is a good thing. There'll be fallout and failure. But it's fantastic. It's kind of like when we open cable TV. Okay, we've got all sorts of good things we can watch. We have to dig for a little more because there's a lot of junk to dig through. But I think it's all okay. I think innovation's awesome.
Michael Dougherty, we appreciate you. Thank you, brother. One more time, if people want to get a hold of you.
Oh, thedevilinsidethebeltway.com is the website, or michaeljdougherty.com, so you know how to spell it. And the book's The Devil Inside the Beltway at Amazon. An audiobook, ebook, hardcover, softcover.
Thank you, sir.
All right, see you.
580-5436, 580-KIDO. Coming up next, a former U.S. attorney, retired U.S. attorney Chuck Ambrose joins us to give us his thoughts on the Mueller report. Remember, Mr. Ambrose was the first one in the Treasure Valley who told us that Comey and Mueller were best friends. Can't wait to hear what Chuck has to say next. And you with me, Kevin Miller, waking up on the right side, KIDO Talk Radio. Rolling right along. Let's go to our friend Chuck Ambrose joining us now, who worked as a U.S. attorney for many, many years, knows all the usual suspects. Mr. Ambrose, good morning.
Good morning, Kevin. How are you?
Not bad. Good to have you with us on KIDO Talk Radio. So, your reaction to Bob Mueller, James Comey, and the Mueller report?
Otherwise known as the most expensive and prolonged deep dive into nothing in the history of the world. 19 prosecutors, dozens of FBI agents, thousands of subpoenas, hundreds of witnesses, hundreds of warrants, and they come up with absolutely nothing. No collusion, no coordination between the Trump campaign, its associates, or the Russians, and yet still coming up with nothing. Mueller and his very biased team of angry Democrats, as they've been called, end up copping out on the question of obstruction. Mueller, according to the summary filed by the Attorney General, did not reach a conclusion because he decided not to apply the DOJ standards and regulations to the obstruction question. And you have to ask yourself, why not? Because that's his job. That's part of his charter. He is supposed to, by regulation, apply those very standards, and yet he and Weissman and the rest just could not bring themselves to the final step to, in their minds, exonerate the president. And let's go through that question real quick, because that and one other are what are dominating the news right now. For obstruction to take place in the federal realm, there has to be a judicial proceeding pending, in order to make this a violation of an attempt to obstruct the administration of justice. For a judicial proceeding to be pending, of course, there has to be a violation that they're looking into, and you can't get there from here if you determine, first of all, that there is no violation, that being the whole collusion question. So to put this into very simple terms, it is impossible under that statute to obstruct an investigation into collusion with Russia if there was no collusion with Russia. Now, there are other obstruction statutes, such as Title 18, 15, 12, if you're talking about tampering with witnesses. But they never came up with anything in that regard. So, you know, it's very telling, this final cop-out that Mueller and Weissman and the rest of this band of merry men just can't bring themselves to cross that last line. But they did defer to the Attorney General and Rod Rosenstein, who's been right in the mix of this whole mess, and those two gentlemen together had to conclude that there was no obstruction. So after all these subpoenas, witnesses, warrants, interviews, and again, consider the effort and abuse employed by these people with pre-dawn raids into white-collar cases, which are so atypical it boggles the mind. I mean, I prosecuted dangerous folks for 30 years, and to get a judge to buy off on a pre-dawn raid without notice, without a knock and announce at the door in daylight hours, you had to really show that there was an impending danger to the arrest team or for obstruction and destruction of evidence. And I just don't see how they get there to do a pre-dawn raid on Manafort or Roger Stone or any of the rest of these people. We know that they pressured folks to the fullest extent and probably beyond the law to try to get to where they wanted to go, and they could not get there from here. But, is the other side or the Democrats going to let this lie? Of course not. They're already setting up a straw man going, they're hiding things because they don't want to release the entire report. And they know, and even the Republicans who joined this 420 vote to nothing in the House to release the whole report know that the department cannot do that lawfully. You have grand jury materials governed by Federal Rule 6E. You have classified material. And if the department were to release the entire report, it would be an illegal act on the part of the department. So Mr. Barr is doing what he should. More will be released if it is either declassified or the president gives permission for that to happen, and we all hope it does. But in the interim, this should be put to bed, and of course it's just not going to be because that's not the agenda of the other side.
Chuck Ambrose joining us very early. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. So, Chuck, do you know William Barr, and what do you make of the comments of Lisa Page saying that she and Strzok, when McCabe came to them originally, said there's nothing there, and yet McCabe drove on with his agenda?
I don't know Mr. Barr closely. I know him when I see him. He was the attorney general that both myself and Joe DeGeneva worked for when we were in the Office of the United States Attorney for the District of Columbia. His reputation is unassailable. I do hope and think he will do a great job. And one of the things, to answer your second part of your question, that I hope he follows up on, and Kevin, this is not because of a desire for political revenge or to punish the, quote, other side. It is a desire to follow the evidence to whoever and whatever a violation shows. We've been through 2 years of an investigation in search of a crime targeting an individual, which is the Russian method. If you want to get into Russian collusion, I mean, that's the old KGB thing. Show me or even Beria, whether it's, Russians or Nazis, show me a man that we want to attack and we'll find a crime on him. That's not the way this is supposed to work here. We're supposed to have violations and then find out who committed them and then take it to wherever that leads under the law. And for this country to have a faith restored in our legal and investigative system, we need to follow the investigation to where it leads and show real violations. Now, Jerry Nadler, the House chairman of one of the committees, has already been all over the television saying that, well, we're going to keep going because the scope of the Mueller investigation was limited. Yeah, he's right, but he's not honest about how it was limited. When Rod Rosenstein wrote the appointment letter for Mueller, he limited that investigation to the Trump campaign and collusion with Russia. In doing so, he was, in my opinion, trying to protect himself because of his role in the Uranium One mess and the Clinton collusion with Russia. And then you still have the whole email business with Secretary Clinton and her security violations. Those matters need to be the subject of a separate appointment of a special prosecutor who now follows the evidence on the other side, because anyone who objectively looks at this knows that there's a heck of a lot more there than there ever was on this collusion side, which, again, should now be put to bed but will not be.
Our great friend,
and,
Chuck Ambrose joining us. Chuck, can we continue this on after the news? We'll call you back so you can rest a little, and then we'll continue on if that works for you.
More than happy to.
Okay, we'll call you back, Chuck. Thank you very much. Keep it here. Much more coming up with Chuck Ambrose, former U.S. attorney, has worked with these folks. We'll have your calls as well. Traffic and weather together. You're listening to KIDO Talk Radio.
I'm News Channel 7's Eric Gebert.
And I'm Kevin Miller. Coming up, much more. Your reaction as well. More analysis with Chuck Ambrose. You're listening to Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Doug.
Good morning, Kevin.
Kevin Miller in the morning, KIDO Talk Radio. Your reaction to the President of the United States, despite what the Democrats say, being exonerated. And we proudly say that right here on Kevin Miller in the morning, waking up on the right side. We got Sean Hannity, we got Glenn Beck, and we're not going to back down. And shame on everybody for going after our president. Your calls, plus former U.S. Attorney, retired U.S. Attorney Chuck Ambrose will be joining us with more analysis coming up. We'll be covering that all day long. Of course, the legislature winding down as well. We'll have that for you as we move along to Glenn Beck. Can't wait to hear what he has to say. Joining us now, our wonderful, wonderful man of the world, Simon Owen, joining us from London concerning Brexit. And Simon, good morning.
Good morning, Kevin.
All right. Boy, we thought we had drama with Robert Mueller. Seems like the Brexit exit, there's drama there.
Yes, and the Mueller investigation is one of those stories that seems to be going on for a long time, and yet it's gone away, and still Brexit continues, and there's no sign of this one wrapping up anytime soon. So, yes, while America has been digesting the findings of the special counsel investigation over the weekend, over here there's been a lot of talk about what's going to happen next with this supposed departure from the EU for Britain, agreed in a referendum close to 3 years ago, but still no word on how or when or even if it's actually going to happen. And the sort of focus at the moment is what this means for the Prime Minister here, Theresa May, because she's at the centre of this. She agreed a divorce deal negotiated over a couple of years with the EU and then brought it back to Parliament at the back end of last year, and she's twice been defeated by pretty sizable margins in Parliament. Lawmakers just don't like it, and so there is this deadlock now. And so this Friday was supposed to be the day that Britain left. It is actually set down in law as this Friday. She's going to have to change that at some point in the next couple of days, because Theresa May went to Brussels last week, asked for more time. She's been given a bit more time by the EU, maybe a few weeks, maybe a couple of months, depending on how things go in the next couple of days. And so now we're waiting to see what happens next. And there's sort of whispers here that it may be that Theresa May takes another shot at trying to convince Parliament to back her Brexit proposal. That might be the next sort of nail-biter in Parliament.
What do you think that how this will play out? Is there a prediction at all?
No, there's not. And you know, the first two times she attempted to get this plan through Parliament, the vote was pretty clearly going to be a defeat on each occasion. Both of them were by big margins. The first one was a historically huge defeat, a record defeat for Parliament. The second one was big as well. The question is, can they get this down to be a bit shorter on this occasion for this third one? There are whispers that maybe lawmakers have come round to the idea, but we just don't know for sure. It could be close that she could squeak it over the line. She only needs to get a majority of one to get it passed. But at the moment, it's up in the air. And she could then go and come back with sort of what they call indicative votes, a series of options for lawmakers saying, if you don't like this plan, what do you like? And that might also be voted on in the coming days. But in the meantime, the word from Brussels is they have said this morning, the EU has said that it has completed preparations for what's known as a no-deal Brexit, Britain leaving without a divorce. It's a potentially chaotic option, but the EU says it's now looking increasingly likely.
Simon, thank you.
Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Before we get back to Chuck Ambrose, Pete from Mountain Home, quickly, your thoughts, then we're going to get some analysis from Chuck Ambrose.
Well, quickly, I have to say Mr. Ambrose missed something important. Even though Trump is not guilty of obstruction, he's not guilty of collusion, a Democrat, I believe it was Senator, came out and said, and they're right about this, he's guilty of interfering in the 2016 election because he ran against Hillary and he beat her, and so that's interfering in the election, right? I mean, that was her election. She won the popular vote, and he interfered. He used the Electoral College, Kevin. That's not fair.
Life isn't fair, my friend Pete.
You got to love them. They are going absolutely frantic.
Any other thoughts before we get back to Big Chuck?
No, that was it. I just wanted to share that little gem from the Democrats that he beat Hillary, and that's interfering in the election.
Well, thank you, Pete. Take care.
You bet. Thank you, Kevin.
Once again, retired U.S. Attorney Chuck Ambrose joining us here on KIDO Talk Radio. If you've missed it, Mr. Ambrose was breaking down the Mueller report, what's next, and the idea how ridiculous it is that the Democrats want the full thing released. Politics and law, does it mix in this case?
It doesn't mix in any case, Kevin. The theme of all of my novels, in fact, if there is one that goes from book to book, is that when you get into the business of trying to establish a just result in any criminal case, politics is nothing but an infection. You have to separate the two completely, and let me summarize where we should be right now. One, since there was no evidence of collusion, there should not have been an investigation of the Trump campaign into a non-crime. That part of this whole mess should die now. But when we say there never should have been an investigation, we go back to your point of what Lisa Page was saying, and that was this whole insurance policy. There has been a mountain of evidence, complete with a money trail establishing collusion by the Clinton campaign, and another mountain of evidence from congressional testimony establishing that all of these people, McCabe, Comey, Lynch, Page, Rosenstein, Bruce Orr, and anyone else who was in this little cabal, abused their authority, and they were the ones actually trying to steal an election to bring down a president without cause. Those are crimes, and they should pay for them. Accountability for criminal conduct should follow the violators, whoever they are, and regardless of their politics or familial connections or anything else. So when we look, for example, at Manafort and Cohen, they committed crimes. They should pay for them. Their association with Trump may have been the reason that they were prosecuted, but the same association is no defense to their criminal conduct, and those convictions should stand. When we get to General Flynn, that's more tricky. In my opinion, based on what I have heard, he did commit criminal offenses by failing to register as an agent of Turkey and taking a pile of money from the Turks. On the other hand, he was not forced by Mueller and Weissman to plead guilty to those real offenses because they did not fit an anti-Trump narrative. Instead, Mueller, Weissman, and company forced him to plead to lying to the FBI when the FBI didn't think he lied. If you're going to pardon anyone, Flynn should be pardoned for that offense, but then an investigation should probably be opened into his failure to register as a foreign agent. This leads to something else that's been sticking in my craw for some time. The continued use of Title 18, Section 1001, making it a crime to lie to the FBI or other investigators, shows that that statute should be repealed. You have the Scooter Libby matter years ago where by the time he was interviewed, everyone knew that the leak that they were investigating had been committed not by him, but by Richard Armitage in the State Department. And it just shows how ripe for abuse this statute is. And if you can't prove the underlying crime, move on. Process crimes like this are nothing more than the fallback position of incompetent and ineffective investigators and prosecutors, and it turns them into modern inquisitors. In 30 years of experience as a federal prosecutor, I never used it. I never needed it. If it was even brought up to me by an agent, I said, look, you go and prove the offense you're investigating and then come back and we'll talk. If we need to add that for some reason, at that point we will. Otherwise, it's nothing more than evidence of obstructive conduct by somebody who may be guilty, and I want to know the guilt first before I proceed on that basis.
Chuck Ambrose joining us. Kevin Miller in the morning, KIDO Talk Radio. Chuck, let's get back to Andrew McCabe, because he's revealed a lot now. When James Comey was dismissed, Andrew McCabe went to his group within the FBI. We've heard from Lisa Page, Peter Strzok, and McCabe seemingly was the driving force behind this. Your thoughts on McCabe's behavior, and we can go back to James Comey and Robert Mueller, but Andrew McCabe and his role in this.
Well, he seems to have been, if nothing else, the master facilitator, encouraging, if not enabling, Strzok and Page and others to embark on this whole abuse of the FISA statute. And, because they are not able to follow their own regulations and open a normal criminal conduct, they go to the FISA courts with this completely inaccurate and corruptly procured dossier from Mr. Steele, and they lie to the FISA courts in order to start this probe of the Trump associates and to get wiretaps of these folks. Anyone who has not been in the federal realm trying to get wiretaps has no idea how corrupt that process is. In terms of normal criminal wiretaps, you have to literally write a book, and normally it takes weeks, if not months, to satisfy a court that a wiretap on an American citizen should be opened in the first place. It's theoretically easier in the FISA realm because we're talking about the specter of foreign interference and agents and espionage and all this sort of thing. So the bar is lower. What they did, knowing they did not have a criminal violation, is say, well, let's go over here. It's like, water trying to find a spot to leak out. We can get there over here when we know we can't get there in the normal course of business. And so we'll look at Roger Stone and these other people, and, we'll hopefully bleed over from the intercepts on them to maybe catching Trump himself or some of his family members talking about this stuff. That's exactly where they were trying to go. And McCabe and Strzok and any other DOJ or FBI official who signed off on that process, and that includes Comey, Sally Yates, Rosenstein himself, anyone who signed off on one of those extensions, first of all, committed a criminal violation, and second, should be disbarred for lack of candor to the tribunal, which is a separate ethical violation under the canons of ethics in any bar association in any state in this country. And it is, in my opinion, a really telling indictment on the legal profession that other attorneys who share the license of those attorneys, like Sally Yates and Mr. Rosenstein, have not gone to their own bar associations and filed complaints because they are ethically obliged to do so. You've got me on a real soapbox this morning, Kevin, but it really is time for the other shoe to drop, and for those in the country who are seeking accountability to be satisfied a little bit by an investigation of the investigators here, because they totally abuse the process in setting this whole farce up.
Chuck Ambrose with us. Chuck, we've only got about a minute left. Let's compare it to what happened under Obama with James Rosen, where ordinary citizens were investigated through the FISA court process and others. How does this compare? Here's the question. Do you have faith in the Department of Justice?
Let me say this. This whole thing has been kind of an epiphany for me. If 12 or 15 years ago you had asked if I thought a conspiracy of this sort was even possible, I would have said no. I thought that people like Rand Paul, who were squawking about the FISA process, were a little bit beyond the pale because we might need it in order to safeguard the country. I will say this. I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, to go back to the old proverb, because we need a lot of these systems in place, and any system that you set up, constitutionally or otherwise, can be abused by evil people. That's what we're seeing now. And rather than throw out every system we've got, rather than indict the whole DOJ and FBI in terms of their historical roles or their ongoing constitutional roles, let's go after the violators who abused those systems. That's what we need to do, not throw the system itself away.
Well, Chuck, we appreciate you getting up early. It was great running into you in the Fred Meyer yesterday, and thank you so much, sir.
Not a problem at all, Kevin. Thank you.
Our great friend Chuck Ambrose joining us, federal prosecutor who knows all the players. Coming up throughout the day, we'll get your comments on what the president has said. He said he's exonerated. The libs say he isn't. We'll take your calls on this. This is a great day in America, but $25 million later. Imagine where that $25 million could have gone to make a big difference, as opposed to supporting the collusion delusion perpetrated by the libs. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. Thank you, Ray Amaya. Celebrating real America. Kevin Miller in the morning, KIDO Talk Radio. We're rolling on the right side. Traffic and weather together.